A bunch of us ragtag renegade cowboys in the middle of hill country saying we're gonna make whiskey here and we're gonna do it different than everybody else. Bourbon is brutal. Like,
folks have been making whiskey there for 200 years.
Anybody can have big ideas.
The Reddits, the Twitters.
It's just not going to work.
It's the execution.
What is she doing down there?
What if we do this?
It's very hard.
And it's painful. Where?
Not to release any information until Wednesday.
Not to release any information until Wednesday.
Just tell them you have the answer.
Just tell them you have the answer.
You know, these people. Come.
Rock and roll is a rebellious music. And one of the first things that struck me about bourbon was rebelliousness in just being there doing nothing but aging.
In Kentucky, you know, folks have been making whiskey there for 200 years. Down here, it was 15 years at the time. So there were a lot of unknowns, but that was part of the allure, you know, the challenge to it.
I don't know if you've been in those warehouses. They're the size of gymnasiums, 9 stories tall. You walk into one of those brick houses, nothing is happening. I mean, nothing. It's like walking into a church. Silent, serene, calm, pleasant. I could smell the dirt, and I could smell the wood, and I could smell the bourbon aging. And I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do.
I mean, there's still folks in Kentucky that think bourbon can only be made in Kentucky. You know, they'll tell you that. But, yeah, we're proving them every day that great bourbon can be made in Texas.
I think part of it is not understanding what's happening in the state. And I also think part of that is until now, maybe it's been, you know, Texan whiskey was a little rough around the edges.
Well, I mean, some people thought Texas whiskey was just hot and tasted like gasoline, so there was that.
You hear people talk about, you know, the spring water up in the Northeast, Kentucky, Tennessee, the grains. You know, those were things that I thought of as well, but I didn't realize there's limestone here in Texas, here in hill country. I had a lot of questions about the grain because, you know, small grains grow well in cooler climates. They produce really well. But if you get up in the northern part of Texas, you've got that. Yeah. So, you know, you've got great growing seasons here for your grain. So I think the grain and the water, there again, you know, it goes back to the climate. I think a lot of people just thought, you know, it's just too hot in Texas. Yeah. You know, it's just not going to work.
Whether that's like I don't like Scotch whiskey or I don't like Japanese whiskey, I think it's hard to just say, just do a broad swath of an entire place as big as Texas and say I don't like it.
I mean, nobody's ever going to be able to go to Kentucky and say your whiskey's not good and you should really put some Texas. I mean, Kentucky whiskey it's been around for hundreds of years. It will be around for hundreds of years. It's the yardstick by which we all measure.
It wasn't like I was trying to prove something. It was more like a test. It's like everyone had this hypothesis. Texan whiskey's hotter. Texan whiskey does A, B, C, and D. And I'm like, well, has anyone tested it?
You know, in Texas, we have a pot still, 2 pot stills. So we can lay down about 500 barrels in a year. Marlene goes to Kentucky and lays down 490 barrels in a week.
And it was Heather and myself, and we was just kind of brainstorming, chatting.
What we did was we enlisted a great distillery up in Kentucky,
They did not contract distill for us.
and we distilled our first batch in 2019. And as that batch came off the still, we took a bunch of those barrels immediately down to Texas and kept the other ones in Kentucky. And we just watched them.
I didn't know what to expect, to be quite honest with you.
The intention originally was to test this against different multiple parts of Texas, which we do want to do. The pandemic happened, so there was a lot of issues with trying to spread barrels all over the United States.
But then as we pulled samples, and we had barrels come in from Kentucky, and we're distilling here all along. We've had barrels aging here from the very beginning. Then you could see subtle little changes at 2 years old, 3 years old.
And we were doing an event in Kentucky, and we brought out the Texas and the Kentucky barrels.
So I'm talking about people that have grew up in the business, been in the business for 3 or 4 decades.
And Heather passed out 2 small glasses, one with the 2-year-old Texas distillate and one with the 2-year-old Kentucky distillate. They had them nose it, taste it, and pick.
The color in the barrels here was more deep in color, darker in color than what we had at the same age up in Kentucky.
Well, the Kentucky distillate, 2 years old, it was anemic in color and tasted very green. You wouldn't want to drink it. The 2-year-old Texas whiskey had beautiful color, had a nice nose, and tasted good. And 80% of those Kentucky distillery folks picked the Texas whiskey as the Kentucky whiskey.
So we knew right away we were on something, that it was like richer and had a lot more flavor at that 2.5-year point.
The Kentucky juice coming around 2.5, 3.5 years old, you could tell they had some sweet notes coming on, but they still needed some time. They were still a little grainy tasting, whereas here, you could pick those flavors out. You could see those flavors at the same time around the 3-year mark.
But it's because of the climate. It was so drastically different, and the answer was so obvious. People talk about terroir all the time with grapes and wine and all this. The climate affects everything.
I would say when we look at what happened at 4 years old, there's a lot of estery notes that are popping out of the Kentucky, and you have a lot of what we saw, of the 10 chemical compounds that are more the oaky and the rich flavor that are coming out of the barrel are developing faster in Texas. So we know that the data is mimicking the actual taste, not only for Milam Greene, but for other Texan whiskeys too. Texas becomes an ingredient in our whiskey. So as a blending ingredient, it's like as a finish. Now, I always loved, people are like, do you source? Yeah. Do you contract? Yeah. Do you do it all? Yes, I do, but it will come back to Hill Country with Marlene, who distills for us, and it puts that beautiful Hill Country stamp on it. When I first came to Milam Greene and I started blending young and old and blending, people were like aghast. They were like, what is she doing? Like, why are they blending young and old? And talking about blending at that time, all anyone talked about was grain to glass. And for me, that's like, you can only paint with blue. You're an artist, but you are not allowed to paint but any shades of blue. Why wouldn't I want to open this warehouse and have this incredible array of casks to pick from to create the whiskey? And that's what Milam Greene is about.
A great musician can find the sweet spot. Musicians have to have ears, and blenders and distillers have to have a palate.
The whole thing about whiskey is letting people experience, have an experience with that whiskey. And I think that's what the answer, a big part of the answer is people can experience the difference in something made in the same place but aged in 2 different locations.
Whether you're putting on a new album or you're making a film, you have this culmination, you do all this work, but then there comes the day when you have to put it out.
Yeah.
And that's when you really find out what you have.
If I had any regrets about this, is that I didn't put more whiskey away. There are only 800 cases of this in the United States.
But one thing before we pour it, I would like for them to see the color difference.
Okay.
Yeah, well, all the color comes from the barrel. And so it'll just give you another little bit of insight into what the barrel and the climate and the action here in Texas, can do with whiskey when it goes in a barrel.
Your right-hand side is Kentucky, and on your left-hand side is Texas.
I think it shows that you've got great bourbon, great whiskey in both locations. Just because it's not from Kentucky doesn't mean that it's not going to be great bourbon or great whiskey. There's distillers here that are doing a great job.
Whiskey's a lens into something bigger. It's about people connecting. We have an ampersand in our brand name, Milam and Greene. And that ampersand means something. It's an and, it's a connection.
And that is what Milam Greene has been able to do with bringing Marlene in, who is an absolute pro and master distiller, and bringing Heather in, who is a master blender. At putting those 2 together, we found the sweet spot.
That's what gives it the provenance and beauty. And of course, people. Whiskey's nothing without people. It's science and art mixed.
Well, I'd love to share it with my father, who was a big influence in my life. And it was a mantra at our house. The liquor business is a good business to be in.
Cheers.
It's recession-proof. People are happy, they celebrate. People are sad, they drink.
It's been the highlight of my career.
When we talk about a bridge, we're talking about a connection. And the connection is 2 states, people, culture, all coming together to create something bigger. And that's what whiskey's about in the first place.
You got to try this whiskey. We have got really great whiskey. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm part of this brand. I'm saying that because that's just the way it is.
Marlene, do these events ever get old for you?
No, not as long as we got this.